Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the Monday show on a Tuesday following Newcastle United's victory over Leicester City. The Magpies went out 3-0 winners and claimed a valuable 3 points in the race for the Champions League. This episode is sponsored by NordVPN, and the link to get your special discounted offer on your plan is in the podcast description box. I am Andrew Musgrove. He is Aaron Stokes. Let's get on with the show. Aaron, welcome back. You well?
Yeah, very well. Monday show on a Tuesday, followed up by a fantastic result. What more can you want?
A huge 3 points last night, and these are the kind of games that the top teams win without a moment's thought.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Yesterday, in the build up the game, I was a little bit nervous, and I don't really know why. You're shaking your head there for those not watching. But I was a little bit nervous, not because of Leicester, but just thinking that, could they potentially go into this a little bit unfocused, maybe take their foot off the gas a little bit and get caught out, just like Spurs did at home a couple of months ago against this team. But I think we all sort of knew within 120 seconds last night that it was job done. And yeah, just a very workmanlike performance. Got it done, get out the way, and then on to Manchester United.
I understand why you were a little bit nervous. I think a lot of Newcastle United fans still have that niggling doubt that they're going to mess up against the teams they should be. And we've seen that this season. But I just felt with what's on the table, what could be achieved at the end of the season, that, this is now kind of show what you're worth. And if you can't be beating Leicester, you don't deserve to be in the Champions League. So I had every reason to think they were going to beat Leicester last night, and they did do. However, is it fair to say that Newcastle, despite scoring 3, weren't at their best?
Yeah, look, I don't think they were at the best. I think it was a very good, dominant first half performance. Even though Newcastle had actually had less of the ball, they were absolutely dominant in terms of going forward. I think second half, they probably took the foot off the gas a little bit. I think Eddie Howe naturally made all 5 subs to maybe rest some players. Players maybe took their eye off the ball a little bit. I don't think it was a poor second half performance by any means, but I also don't think Newcastle kicked on like we saw them do against Sheffield United famously last season. But then there's a part of me that thinks, is that a good thing? Would I really have wanted to see players running themselves into the ground in that second half and potentially injuring themselves? I don't know. So I just think it was a very workmanlike and professional performance from Newcastle.
Which was very, very key. And then you can take your foot off the gas in the second half, which I thought they did. I thought there was a lot of stray passes and some careless moments in possession. And Eddie Howe said that they can play better. And in my view, ultimately, if they are going to clinch a Champions League place, they will have to play better. There's going to be much bigger challenges coming down the road than Leicester City. But that being said, Aaron, you can only beat what's in front of you. And Newcastle were clinical in the first half and had the job done within the first 45 minutes. So that's the key thing, and you can't really complain.
Yeah, 100%. Look, it was, as we've just touched on there was always the potential of a banana skin. I think it was, our colleague Lee Ryder yesterday who said in his match preview video that there's no easy games in the Premier League, but this feels like an easy game. And I think Eddie Howe will have drilled that into his players that, yes, on paper, Newcastle should be beating this team, but they need to bring their A game. And thankfully, in the first half an hour, they did that. I thought attacking-wise, they were very, very good. But also, I was listening to Eddie Howe talk before the game, before a ball had been kicked, and he was talking about that Brentford win, which was obviously huge in the context of the season. And he used a phrase along the lines of, it was an average performance and a great result. And I think he'll probably be looking at that second half thinking that was pretty average and making sure that they, go on better on Man United on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. It's very much like that Brentford performance where you think they've got the result. That's what mattered.
Yeah.
They weren't at their best. Just imagine how good they're going to be in a week's time or a couple of weeks' time when they've had more minutes on the training pitch and they've really got a bit of momentum behind them. I know that hopefully will kickstart on Sunday, where we see maybe a 60-minute performance of a high level, and they've got a 2 or 3 goal lead. And we'll talk about the team first off before we actually talk about the goals that won Newcastle United the game. The team was unchanged with Alexander Isak starting. Were you surprised at that? I think a lot of people thought he might be rested, start Callum Wilson from the first whistle and just save Isak's energy and legs for tougher games coming down the line.
No, I think it's pretty clear that Eddie Howe has got a mantra along with Alexander Isak, and that at the minute is if he is fit and if he's fully fit, he plays, and if he's not 100%, he doesn't. And I think the fact that Alexander Isak played last night, yes, he came off early, maybe didn't look at the races entirely. I don't think Eddie Howe would have started him unless he was fit. I thought he would start. There was no real surprises for me with the team sheet. Obviously, Joe Willock not being on the bench was probably the only one. But in terms of the start 11, I thought that was who it was going to be. And it was quite telling, actually, afterwards that the Sky Sports commentator said to Eddie Howe, do you have to manage Alexander Isak in the next couple of weeks? And Howe said, no, I don't think so. Eddie Howe thinks that he's fit enough to play, fit enough to start. And thankfully, he came through last night unscathed, it looks like.
There was a moment midway through the second half when he looked like he gestured to the bench and he put his hand up, and I was about to text you saying, oh, I think he's pulled up there. In the end, I was mistaken. I don't know what he was waving at. Maybe he was just a little bit angry, didn't get the service. But there is that fear, isn't there, inside absolutely every single Newcastle United fan? I think it's a very important question from the commentator. And I'm not sure I entirely believe Eddie Howe in his answer, because I think there is a big degree of having to manage Alexander Isak, because we know he's not as guaranteed to play as we'd like him to be, because he has suffered injuries, and the same injuries every now and then, and also because you haven't really got a replacement for him. As good as Callum Wilson is in front of goal, he's not a replacement. Asula's not ready. You haven't got someone who can come in and make an absent Alexander Isak feel like it's not really that important. So I think there is a degree in having to manage him, because I don't think he's totally out of the woods when it comes to injuries and being fully fit. And that's just my opinion, but it is my opinion.
But just on that, then, you're sort of saying, well, you've got to manage Alexander Isak, you've got to take him out if you don't think he's fully fit. But then you're saying, well, they don't really have a replacement for him. So what does Howe do?
Well, that's it. It reaffirms the need in the summer to go out and get an out-and-out striker, someone who can push Alexander Isak for that first place team, that place in the first team, but also someone who can actually maybe get in there ahead of him. That's what we all want. Won't be cheap. I don't know who that might be, but that's what has to happen in the summer. And look, managing him, it might be a case of during the week, does he take part in those drills in which Eddie Howe and his staff really push him hard, or does he just take it a bit leisurely and he works more on the ball, and he's not pushed as hard as the other players because we maybe just need to protect them? And or do you just say, look, he's fit, you push him in, and he's with the rest of the group and he'll get through it?
No, look, I think there will be monitoring him closely. And yes, Eddie Howe came out last night and sort of batted away the question or any notion that Alexander isn't fully fit. But I think also they will have a very, very close eye on him. James Blunt and his team will be watching him very closely in midweek and making sure they're not overdoing it. Because as you say, he has had knocks this season. It wasn't, too long ago that he was really struggling with that groin injury, which he seems to be sort of, picking up from time to time. So, but as you say, that is the debate. That's the dilemma as well. If Eddie Howe thinks Alexander Isak is fit to play, but then arrests him because he wants to save him for Manchester United or Palace, do you go into that game last night with Callum Wilson, who isn't really in the best of form, who himself needs to be managed? He clearly doesn't think Will Asula is ready, especially not playing centrally. He doesn't look like he's going to give game time to Sean Neve either anytime. So, it's a little bit of a pickle for Eddie Howe. And Eddie Howe rightly is probably looking at it and thinking last night, well, I'll tell you what, if I start Alexander Isak and Newcastle are 3-0 up at half time, it means I can bring him off pretty sharpish.
Well, there's 2 points there. I mean, first off, how good was it to see other people scoring goals with Isak not being on form last night? And secondly, you're right, the options there, the youngsters, some would argue it's the right time, but Eddie Howe obviously doesn't think that. And I think the key point is, you play him, you hope Newcastle United have done the job, and then you can bring him off. Were you surprised that he stayed on the pitch as long as he did?
A little bit, yeah. I think some other managers maybe would have rolled the dice at half time. I think Eddie Howe was maybe a little bit more cautious than that. But even as we crept towards sort of the hour, I was thinking, come on, Eddie, it's time to get him off now and get him wrapped in cotton wool. But I think Eddie Howe probably just wanted to see that game out. I think if you'd taken him off at half time and Leicester had got a really quick goal back in the second half, which obviously probably wasn't going to happen, then there might have been a little bit of panic set in. So I think Eddie Howe was probably right to do it. We knew he was going to make changes. We obviously saw Trippier, Murphy, Isak, the likes come off, the 2 midfielders as well. So it was just a good chance to get those off in the second half and get them rested for the weekend.
Dale, who was watching live on YouTube, says, I thought Isak looked very leggy last night and didn't have much energy. I wanted Howe to bring him off sooner for Wilson.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were making that assessment. I think a lot of people wanted him off the pitch sooner. And as I just said there, I think a lot of people probably would have had him whipped off at half time, if not in the 35th minute when Harvey Barnes had scored that third. So I was a little bit surprised maybe he didn't come off sooner, but I think for the reasons I just mentioned, I can sort of see Eddie Howe's logic. And I think, again, that goes to Again, I know we'll keep going back to it every couple of minutes, but it does reaffirm the fact that there isn't really an option there. I mean, we're going to talk about Callum Wilson, I'm sure, in this episode, and there's a lot of debate now around what happened with him. Does he look like he's maybe lost a yard of pace? He doesn't look as comfortable on the ball. He isn't scoring. He hasn't found the net since he came back. Will Asula looked okay last night, looked raw, but looked confident and willing to run with the ball. A lot of people now making the point that it maybe should be him to come in rather than Wilson off the bench.
It's an interesting one for me. My viewpoint on Wilson has not changed whatsoever. You get rid in the summer. He's just not good enough to be part of this squad going forward. I know with the Champions League, it's going to be important to have squad depth if Newcastle get there. Conference League, Europa League, whichever European competition they're in, they're going to need depth. But I think Newcastle United rolled the dice last summer by not going in and getting another forward and just sticking with Wilson and Isak, and that backfired to a certain degree. I think you roll it again this summer if you keep him. Although Eddie Howe has made noises to suggest that he would like to keep him at Newcastle United, I would not be a fan of that. And I think now is the time to cut him loose. Say thank you very much. You've been fantastic, but we'll see you off into the sunset, and then we'll go out and buy someone who can really compete with Alexander Isak, and who you can just guarantee can start more games than Callum Wilson.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the quote here on my laptop for Howe talking about Wilson's contract and as you said, the fact he probably will offer him a new deal. I can't find the exact quote, but I think it is worth remembering that it was only 6 weeks ago that he was asked that question at Benton on a Friday morning and basically said, look, I see Callum Wilson at this club, beyond the summer. And I think a lot of people, as you say, will probably be thinking, well, they're maybe not too.
It's interesting though for Howe to say that on the record. He must have some evidence and some belief that the injuries that have dogged Callum Wilson for far too many years are past him.
Which, if you're a better man, you probably wouldn't bet on the fact that Callum Wilson has got rid of his injuries. I mean, every time he sprints for the ball, I sort of hold my breath because I've got a feeling that hamstring's going to go again. I think, again, and it's something that I've probably said in the last couple of windows, I think if we get to the summer and Newcastle sign a striker and we still see enough in Callum Wilson to think he can maybe do it at this level, then I think, is there any harm keeping him the third choice? I think, again, and it's something that, I've said for months, really, even when we used to have those debates about the third striker being brought in, I think Callum Wilson is a second choice striker and I was too unreliable. But I think if he's a third and he's back up and he's still at the level, I don't see why you wouldn't keep him.
Does he accept that? Is probably the question.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, what the other options are really which Premier League teams are going to give him first team minutes? I mean, you could probably say a team in the bottom 5 or 6 or 7. That might be being a bit harsh to Wilson. I don't want to, do him too much of a disservice, but I think because of that injury record, you're not going to see a Premier League club in the top 14 or 13 say you are going to come in and be our number one man. Do you maybe get someone like a Burnley or a Leeds next season who think, well, you're experienced, if you've got the legs, you can do it. Other than that, you're talking Saudi, you're talking Turkey, you're talking, a move abroad. And again, I don't want to do a disservice to Callum Wilson, but he's getting no younger. He still hasn't shaken off those injuries. And I think just from what we've seen in the last 5 or 6 games, he hasn't done too much to sort of win Newcastle fans over that he's got a future here.
I mean, he hasn't had that many chances, to be quite honest. He's come on when the game's either been won, when Newcastle United aren't really pushing for victory because it's already been sewn up. So, any names that spring to mind in terms of where you think Newcastle United might go to in the summer?
Look, I think there's a couple of sort of schools of thought you can go. I think, look, we know that they're looking at Jonathan David from Lille, who would essentially come in and be number 2, but I think would be a decent backup. He's done well in France. He's done well in Europe.
Sorry, can I just interject there? That shows you how good Alexander Isak is when we're describing Jonathan David as a backup.
Well, exactly. This is the dilemma Newcastle have, because you're not going to find anybody in the world of PSR that is as good as Alexander Isak. So it is essentially who's going to be happy to play a second fiddle. Then you go and think, well, right, do Newcastle really go and push the boat out and say, we'll go and sign someone like Victor Gyökeres? He obviously knows Alexander Isak from Sweden, doing very, very well at Lisbon. He's wanted by the likes of Chelsea and Manchester United and Arsenal. Him coming in would be a real message to the league, wouldn't it? Of, okay, we're signing someone.
A statement.
A very big statement. So that's another school of thought, which I probably don't think is going to happen because of the budget and what it would cost. And then you look at someone younger, someone like Liam Delap, who probably wouldn't cost you half as much as Gyökeres, still young enough to maybe accept being second fiddle in a Champions League team, but who's also done it in the Premier League. So Or then you say, look, do we really throw all our eggs behind Willisula and say Wilson becomes third choice, Willisula, gets the chance? You're Winton. I don't think I don't think that's going to happen. But let's say Newcastle United go out and spend the summer and they get a really expensive right winger, and then they sign a new goalkeeper and a centre back, and they suddenly look at the budget and think, well, we can't afford Liam Delap or Kai Perez or David, even though David would be on a free. It's a fourth option. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think that's the school of thought around the summer.
It's interesting. And I wasn't going to mention ladies and gents, but as he's mentioned him, why not? Liam Delap, go back this summer. Suggestion. What time have you got there?
10 minutes it took you to mention Liam Delap.
If only Newcastle had listened to me in the summer and got him for a bargain, he's now going to cost double.
But this is the thing, and it's a point that I've seen a lot of people making in response to your sort of saying about David. Would he have played this season? Sorry, not Dave Delap. How much would he have played this season?
Well,
really?
Quite a lot, because Isak missed quite a bit of the season between October and the turn of the year, didn't he? I'm not mistaken in thinking that. I'm gonna research that and come back with an answer. But I'm pretty sure Isak was missing. He picked up that injury against Fulham, did he not? I've got it, yeah, right. So, oh my God, we're there. Maybe not.
How many games did he miss? 3.
So he sat out Man City and Everton. I don't know why in my head I had it that he hasn't played that. I thought he played less games than that, to be quite honest with you. But maybe I'm totally mistaken. He's actually played 27 games. And how many of Newcastle United played? 30? Yeah. Okay, so that's my point gone. But the point being, if Eddie Howe maybe had an option to play a striker who's a bit deadly and fit in the Premier League, then maybe he would have played Liam Delap had he had that option. And instead of, he's got Callum Wilson, who's not fit. And there were times this season as well when Isak's looked a little bit off form, when he hasn't maybe looked himself. So anyway, point being, Liam Delap, maybe an option in the summer. But on Asula, what we saw last night, I felt was the best and worst of them. I think we saw the drive, the endeavour to do something, I don't know what the right word is, the enthusiasm.
The willingness.
Yes, the willingness. He beats a man and fires one over. I mean, if that had gone in, it would have been proper celebrations. And it was great to see that. He's very enthusiastic, plenty of energy, great running. But we also saw, I think, why he's not been given more minutes this season, because there was 2 or 3 examples where he's tried to take on a man that puts his team into a little bit of danger. One of them, Leicester, managed to get the ball and then go on the counter. Now, if that's a top side and you're giving the ball away, was it 10, 15, 20 yards from the halfway line, and then you're getting it on the counter, that could end up in the back of the net. Thankfully, it's just Leicester. But I do think we saw just why Eddie Howe hasn't been able to trust him just yet. He's raw. I think there's definitely a player there. But last night showed why this development plan is really important, and why Eddie Howe, I think, will be proved right in the long term.
Yeah, it's hard to be too critical on Wilson, because like we've just said with Callum Wilson, he isn't getting too much opportunity to impact the games. He's not playing any under-21 football at all. He's strictly with the first team, but he's not actually playing that many minutes. And I think it's telling that the best games we've seen Willisula in the season are against Birmingham, against Wimbledon, against Bromley. And look, that's no shade on him, but I think have we really saw Willisula come off the bench in a Premier League game and thought, wow, he's ready? I'm not too sure. Everybody keeps making the, I don't want to call it a lazy analysis, but it's the predictable analysis of saying, well, it worked with Lewis Hall, it's going to work with Willisula. There's no sort of guarantee it will. There's definitely flashes of a player there. I like Willisula. I think he could come good. But I think, as you say, I think we maybe saw some of that rashness, some of that rawness last night, running down, sort of blind channels, losing the ball, taking an extra couple of touches. But look, he's young. He's not getting much football. He's not getting, many minutes. Do they even send him out on loan in the summer? I don't know. But I think, I'm not writing him off, but I think those calls to see more of him from the start, over Wilson, or maybe out of fans' hope,
yeah,
rather than definitive proof that he's a better option than Wilson at this present time.
And what I will say, I've definitely been in that camp where I've gone, why is Wilson coming on? Why not give it to Asula? But last night, just in that brief cameo you had, I kind of have changed my mind, because, like I said, I think I saw enough to just reaffirm why you've got to trust Eddie Howe and the staff, that their pathway for Asula is the right one. Because I think Eddie Howe would have been a little bit, maybe angry is the wrong word, and I'm not going to say disappointed either, but he wouldn't have been happy at that moment where he loses the ball and it goes to Leicester and they go down the pitch and try and create something. Because you've got to be You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of slightly. Remember that scene in Goal when he's training indoors and the man just says, "Kick the ball," and he kicks it and he says, "Well, what did you learn?" He goes, "That you can score from halfway." And he goes, "No, that that what is
It
he says,
travels
the
faster
ball
than the
travels
mind.
faster than the man,"
Yeah.
and that's what it kind of reminded me like that raw kind of player who needs to learn a bit more. That it's not about taking on 2 or 3 men. It's not always about going forward. It's about actually maybe sometimes going back or going sideways. It's not always about having to try and score a goal. And I think it just proved that he's got a lot to learn.
I do get that. I think just in defense of Willisula, he was very, very self-confident. We saw that in the
I love him, by the way.
yeah, and we love that. But we saw in those trophy parade scenes him taking centre stage. He's a very confident man, and I think coming off the bench last night against a woeful Leicester team like that, he'll have been thinking, this is my time to get a goal in the Premier League. On the other point we've just been making about Wilson, Asula's game time, I think, you made a good point there. I think Eddie Howe, he sees these players day in, day out. He knows if Willisula was really ready to be challenging Isak and beating Wilson and playing off the right over Murphy or whatever else, he would be doing it. And I think we need to trust Eddie Howe that he's making the right decision for his development.
100%. We've got a comment here from Garius who says, absolutely smashing. Wilson and Asula both have something to offer. Asula needs to slow down or improve his decision making. Both provide good cover for Isak. Wilson yesterday did some wonderful running. Darren says, I would have taken Isak off at half time. John says, the high press lone striker role is bound to be energy sapping for Isak. Hopefully it'll be managed well in the last 8 games. And Choppy says, I always brick it when Wilson runs. I always think he's going to get injured. I think everybody watching and listening do indeed share that same fear. Right. Let's talk Harvey Barnes just before we get into the actual goals, because there was no Anthony Gordon in the squad, and I predict that in the preview because I just felt there's no need to rush him back. Barnes is in good form. Let's take our time with Anthony Gordon. We know how good he is. We know how crucial he is to Newcastle United. But when you've got Barnes in this vein of form, there's no need to risk Gordon, and you can just take your time. What did Howe have to say about Gordon? Because it appears that it's not just being kind of like he was close to actually being in the squad yesterday. It does appear that he's nowhere near.
Well, Eddie Howe said the exact opposite. Yeah, he said Anthony wasn't close to being available. He hasn't been able to train with us yet since returning from England. He's still feeling the effects of that tackle on international duty. We hope we may see him soon, but I've got no certainty on that.
Wow, so that
pretty
means
definitive. Yeah,
Manchester United might be too far from
Palace
too close.
might be too close. Yeah.
But with Harvey Barnes, as I said, in good form, getting on the score sheet last night, and absent Gordon isn't the worst thing, and it's not been felt as much because Barnes is stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, look, it's similar to the something I wrote about last night, similar to the Lewis Hall absence. It's not really being felt because Tino Livramento has excelled on the left all of a sudden, and I think it's definitely right to say that Harvey Barnes has as well. Very, very good last night again. Glad he got his goal. Another good performance. He's getting those goals and assists like we saw at West Ham before the break. I think we should probably stop, skirting the question and just dive straight into it. And I think this is probably where I'm not going to be too popular based on what I've seen on social media. I think if Anthony Gordon was fit for this weekend, he comes straight back in.
No, I don't. I think Barnes is in such good form. You can't take him out.
Such good form, is he?
He's scoring goals. He's assisting. And I also think the relationship that him and Tino have built over the last few games, I think it would be a little bit dangerous against a side like Manchester United to take Barnes out, bring Gordon back in, who's not going to be match fit. Even if he's past fit, he's not going to be match fit. They're two totally different things. And also, what kind of message does it send to Harvey Barnes as well, who, again, for me, is in good form? I don't think you can just take him straight out. And I think the goal last night will make that decision even harder for Eddie Howe. I think if Gordon had been past fit for last night, I don't think he would have started either. I don't think you need to take out a winger like Barnes, who's having the best period of the season. Why did you take him out?
I personally would have Gordon back in if he was fully fit.
Why?
I think Barnes has been good, but I think Gordon this season has just been 10 times better. And I think you play your best team, and I think Anthony Gordon, he's not really a player I like seeing off the bench, whereas Harvey Barnes is. I think Harvey Barnes has a good game. He's certainly improved. He's played well against West Ham. He was good last night. but I don't think like I've seen enough to say, wow, he is now undroppable in the short term. I
Well,
don't think I've seen enough.
I think undroppable is the wrong word, but I also
No,
think
but
there's a lot
in the short term, I mean,
I think there's a lot of elements that come into that question and the answer. It's Anthony Gordon coming back from what appears to be quite a nasty injury. So there's that. And also, like I said, there's that relationship between Tino and Barnes. Does Gordon have the same relationship? Or would it take him a few weeks to build it up? So I think there's a lot of elements to whatever answer people get. And let us know in the comments your thoughts. But for me, Barnes keeps in that team. I think he's a danger, he's a threat, and he's helping Newcastle United towards the Champions League. And anyway, it's a bit irrelevant because it looks like Gordon won't be fit for Sunday anyway. We'll talk more about Barnes' goal in a moment, but let's start with Jacob Murphy's brace. And you can't beat a lovely early goal. And that's what Newcastle United got after just 2 minutes. And it was a really nice goal. Great work down the left. Joe Linton to Barnes. Livermore on the overlap and the cross into the box for Murphy to tap home. Really nicely worked. Although we have to admit the defending was rather poor. But nevertheless, the early goal sets the tone for the rest of the game.
Yeah, very good of the cameras to pan to Van Nistelrooy as he was being swearing. It's the state of that defence. I mean, yeah, look, brilliant goal, brilliant to set the tone, and especially after Leicester took 12 seconds to test Nick Pope. Newcastle bounced straight back within a minute or so. Really good move. The build-up was actually really nice, and I think it gets forgotten about because of obviously the assist and the earliness of the goal. But it was a really good build-up. Barnes as well. Tino, it looks like he's getting better and better going forward. I'll hold my hands up. I wasn't sure whether it was going to work after West Ham. I thought he looked a little bit unnatural. He always wanted to come in on his right. And I thought he was slowing the Newcastle attacks down. But, ever since that cup final, he's looked like a really, really natural left-sided player, using his weak foot, great cross. And Murphy gets to the back post and doesn't miss.
Beautiful cross.
Yeah.
But I always had faith that he would come good because to be thrown into that kind of scenario, replacing Lewis Hall, who was arguably being the player of the season, was always going to be difficult. Unfamiliar side, unfamiliar winger in front of you. In your mind, the cup finals just a few days away as well. So I was always confident that with a couple of games under his belt, he'd be absolutely fine. And look, you have to applaud him because the tests that he's had, Bowen, Salah, and Burmo, he's kept all three of them quiet. Unfortunately, I can't name you a Leicester threat that he kept quiet, but that's more about them than it is him. And I think he's just been absolutely brilliant. And he was my man of the match, Tino Livramento.
Same.
I thought he was
Definitely.
absolutely fantastic. And it was down to his running because he just always wanted to take the ball forward. He's not afraid. He loves running at people, but he's got close control. And then he's got the end product as well. Absolutely brilliant. So he was my man of the match.
He was mine as well. I thought he was absolutely exceptional, both going forward and going backwards. It was good to see the crowd really appreciate him as well. There was a lot of chants from yesterday. They're really taking him to their hearts. Really good performance. And like I say, I've been really impressed by how much he looks like he's settled into that role going forward, especially.
More to come from him. But yeah, just to point on the poor defending from Leicester. As you mentioned there, Vardy had just tested Pope up the other end 30 seconds later, and Leicester are behind. And if you watch that passage of play, it's just really poor from Leicester. Newcastle just wanted it more in every single challenge. Joe Linton Bruno goes in with a challenge, and the Leicester City midfielder just absolutely bottles it, forces Joe Linton. That's when the passage of play really kicks in. But Livramento was just not tracked. He's just totally allowed to overlap Barnes. Daka, who tries to get in on Joe Linton, is just shrugged off. I mean, so easily. He's not too far behind Livramento, and he looks like he thinks about it. Like he thinks about tracking him and then just kind of goes, well. And Livramento was allowed to roam free. I mean, if I was a Leicester City fan, you're angry anyway and you're upset, but watching that first goal in particular, just thinking, where's the desire and commitment and want? Newcastle United didn't have to get out of first gear, and it just showed you how bad Leicester were.
I'm going to be honest, I think you're a better man than me if you stayed in that stadium after that second goal 11 minutes in, because I think, one, I was actually surprised there was that many home fans there for the start of the game. Bear in mind, Leicester haven't scored a league goal at home since December the 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
That is right. That is correct.
They haven't scored at all in the Premier League since January 26th. Just really dismal stuff. And there was a thing you said there where Leicester players, and it wasn't just in the first or second minute, it was the entire 95, kept thinking about going, kept thinking about making the run, thinking about making the challenge, and they just looked like they were so devoid of confidence. They just They were just second best at everything. They were really, really poor. I cannot wrap my head around the fact they are 7 points clear of Southampton. How bad must Southampton be? Because Leicester generally were just abject, especially defensively last night.
How grateful are Tottenham that there's 3 really poor sides, because
and
they would be
Wolves as
looking
well,
over their shoulder. But yeah, I know someone who was working in Leicester on Monday, and he's a Borough fan, but he was saying that people that he's working with down in Leicester were trying to give away their tickets. He didn't just have one offer; he had several offers of a ticket. If you want to come and see some football, I don't think they described it as a joyous watch. Although he's a Borough fan, as I mentioned, so he'd be happy to watch Newcastle United. And you can see some proper football, but that just shows you the kind of atmosphere that Newcastle United walked into. And sometimes that's not an easy thing to take advantage of. I mean, usually in this circumstance, when you're staring relegation right in the face, it's pretty much done and dusted. There's still a little bit of fight, but there's nothing from the players, and there's nothing from the terraces, and there's no unison. They're not fighting for one another, and obviously it's down to the players to make sure that the Leicester fans have something to shout about. But other than that young kid coming on, there was nothing really that got the fans out of the seats. And I do feel for them. We've been there as fans, under Mike Ashley, where you just think we're just existing as a club these days. But look, Newcastle United had to be professional and clinical on the win. As much as we can feel sorry for Leicester City, we have to take advantage of that and make sure we win these games.
Yeah, look, and I'll admit I do feel sorry for Leicester. I like Leicester as a club. It's mad to think they won the Premier League less than a decade ago, and they're staring their second relegation in the face since then. But as you say, Newcastle had to be rueful. They did, and I think for me, any of those pre-match nerves that I spoke about at the very, very start of the episode were pretty much extinguished after 110 seconds, which was good for my evening.
Well, the second goal came from Jacob Murphy as well, although he did his best to miss the effort. Fabian Schär hit one from just over the halfway line. It's beaten the keeper to come back off the bar. Murphy takes not one bad touch, but 2 bad touches before putting the ball into the back of it. Actually, a really nice finish if you forget the first 2 touches. I just like the fact that Murphy was switched on and ready to run.
Yeah, Murphy was actually, and he said after the game, he was pretty annoyed that Fabian Schär hadn't played him through, because if you watch the replay, the better option must have just feed Murphy in on goal, because he was away. Fair play to Murphy though for still running and chasing it, because the 3 Leicester defenders just sort of stopped and watched. Do you want to hear what Fabian Schär said? About the shot. Speaking to Lee Ryder last night in the mix zone at the King Power, he said, it was just instinct in that situation. I saw the keeper off his line and I thought we could have scored from that. I felt it might be a little bit too long, but I knew it had been hit well. When it hit the bar, I was devastated. But I was pretty happy that Jacob Murphy scored the goal, because it was a big moment. Fabian Schär is now in the record books. He is now... hang on, how do I phrase this? That is now the longest effort to hit the bar.
Who's come up with that?
So he now holds the record for having the shot furthest away from goal that's hit the bar, hit the woodwork.
I love these bottles.
Yards, I think it is. Yeah, look, it would have been some strike, and I think only Fabian Schär in this current Newcastle side would have given that a go. But yeah, fair play to Murphy for following it in, because he could have quite easily stopped and admired it, and he didn't.
I love the fact you can see as it hits the bar, Isak's got his hands up in the air celebrating. Barnes has got his hands on his head, and then Murphy's the only one that reacts.
I know Fabian Schär is a team player, and as he said there, he was happy that Murphy scored, but I would be absolutely fuming if that was me.
Mate, you try and pull that off. That's going nowhere near the goal.
That's trickling into the corner flag.
That's 8 goals for Murphy this season in all competitions, 7 in the Premier League. Chipping in with assists too. Is there a real chance that his form knocks down the need for a right winger, as in down the shopping list?
No, I don't think so.
No?
No. Look, I think Jacob Murphy's had a fantastic season. He's proven his worth. But I think until we've seen this on a regular basis, and by that I mean longer than 3, 4, 5 months, I don't think he cements his place in that team, because I still think we can see his frailties and some of his not negatives, but his weaknesses at times. And I also think, just purely from a squad depth point of view, I mean, we haven't even touched on the fact that that squad is looking mightily thin at the minute. And I think you look at that position, and even if it's if you need to strengthen anywhere, this summer, it's right wing, because you've only really got Jacob Murphy as an out-and-out option there at the minute.
I mean, so you would be disappointed if we got to the ends of the second window this summer, because for some reason there's two transfer windows, and it was and that right winger hadn't come in.
Yeah.
Or what about, because obviously we're talking Alanga, we're talking Mbeumo, people might say Jared Bowen as well, but you're talking 60, 70, 80, 90 million for some of those players. What if Newcastle United went out and got someone who wasn't as established as those three names, and got someone who you're looking at maybe in 18 months to 2 years might be the star that we all want in Newcastle United? And what that does is puts that new rival Murphy on a level playing field, as opposed to going out and spending big on Alanga, on a Mbeumo, who comes in as first choice because the talent and ability, but also the price tag wouldn't allow anything other than them starting.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think let's say for that price, you'd probably be looking at what someone like Bakayoko at PSV, someone who is probably not going to cost you half as much as Brian Mbeumo. You could probably get him for 30 million, but hasn't done it in the Premier League yet, and would probably be coming in with the task of beating Jacob Murphy to that spot. And I think that's fine. I think for me, as long as they get somebody who is not necessarily an upgrade, but somebody who can fill in that position, I would want an upgrade on Murphy talent-wise. But certainly if Jacob Murphy keeps this form between now and the end of the season, I'm not going to be calling for him to be dropped. But I think long-term, Newcastle United, if they want to be challenging for titles, need a goal-scoring right winger.
I guess that's the dilemma, isn't it? Like, is the right wing still number one priority?
For me, I think so. I think others might look at Murphy's form and think, well, centre-back's probably more so, or a backup to Isak, or maybe even a goalkeeper. But for me, I still think the right wing's it.
Yeah, no, I do as well. And I want an instant upgrade. I want someone to come in, because I think Murphy's been brilliant. The form is excellent. And whoever comes in will be pushed by Jacob Murphy. But we need Eddie Howe and the board and the transfer gurus to be ruthless.
Yeah.
This is not the time for sentiment. If the money is there and the right players available, and you can go out and you can sign Brian Mbeumo, you sign Anthony Alanga, go and do it, because the trajectory Newcastle United are on, it's only going to continue if you have this constant upgrade of players. And at the moment, the right wing is the one position that hasn't been strengthened since the takeover. And as good as Murphy is doing, you're right, there's questions of whether he can do it long term. And unfortunately, I don't think he can do. And the player that has to come in has to be more than just about depth. It has to be, for me, an instant upgrade. And you get that with Mbeumo, you get that with Alanga, you get that with Bowen. You also have to pay a fair whack for them as well. So let us know in the comments your thoughts. Has Murphy done enough to put your priorities elsewhere when it comes to the transfer window? Harvey Barnes gets to third, a tap in from Joelinton's saved effort, but he started the break. And as I said in the run-up to this game, these are huge fixtures for Barnes, because he has so much to prove to so many people, and yourself by the sounds of it. And he really is taking the opportunity, in my opinion, with Gordon being out.
Yeah, look, as I say, he has had a good stretch of form. He's played well. He's worked well with Tino. I'll agree with you on saying that. It was very, very good to see him not only get that goal last night, but full of running, full of wildness with the ball at his feet. I think it'll have done him a world of good having this little period in the team. And look, as we said, we read the Eddie Howe quotes out before. It looks like he's going to get Manchester United. At least he might get Palace next week. That's two big home games to really stamp down and lay a marker. And maybe the next time we do a Monday show in 2 weeks' time, I'll be saying, forget what I said, Anthony, it's time for a seat on the bench. But I think Barnes really needs to make the most of these next couple of weeks where Gordon's recovering.
Certainly. So I think he has been, and he will continue to be. But yes, that's right, ladies and gents. Aaron isn't going to be on next week's Monday show because he's off gallivanting yet again. This man has more days off than Harvey Barnes does assists, unfortunately. But we'll.
So not that many then.
No, not that. But I'll be doing a solo one next Monday, so tune in for that. We've got Les saying, I thought Barnes has looked more of a team player in recent games. Good link up with Tino for the cross to Murphy. Let us know your thoughts on Harvey Barnes and his future. Let's talk about we'll talk about actually, we've talked about William Sula and Tina Livermore. They were both on my list. Yeah. We'll talk about Newcastle up to 5th, because that is where they are in the league table. Joint with Chelsea in 4th. The West London side do have a better goal difference, but to be above Villa and Man City going into the next round of fixtures, in which is arguably quite a good month for Newcastle when you look at the teams coming up. I know Palace are in good form. Man United, though, again, on paper, you're saying that's a game Newcastle United should be winning. Palace, okay, is difficult, but you see at home again, should be winning that. Ipswich as well to round off the month, isn't it?
Yeah, 26.
Really, Newcastle United should be lucky, and I'm sure how it is, without disrespecting the opposition, I getting at least 6 from 9 here.
Oh, they've got such favourable fixtures coming up. I mean, Manchester United at home. This Manchester United team, you're expecting to win. Palace are probably the trickiest one because they've won 4 of the last 5. They're on a really, really good run, and I they're probably too far out from getting Champions League, but they're certainly still in the hunt for Europe if they can keep this form up. And then Ipswich, as you say, you're expecting them to win. So as you say, 6, 7 from 9, they'll probably be expecting. Results this weekend were quite favourable. Chelsea dropped points, City dropped points. Obviously, Villa won, but Newcastle's still above them.
Well, this is the next question. Instead of looking over our shoulders at Villa, are we looking ahead to Forest? 4 points off of the game in hand?
I mean, yeah, look, certainly on paper. There's always been this little doubt about Forest, and I think it's because it's Forest and they've never really been in this position for the last 20 or so years. But a lot of people have been saying Forest are going to fall off, and I've seen no evidence really that they're going to. Now, Villa away is a tough place to go. They've been beaten on Saturday narrowly. So I'm not going to say I'm going to write Forest off yet. I still think Forest get there, but there's absolutely nothing to say Newcastle shouldn't be targeting third. They're only a goal behind Forest on goal difference. So yeah, look, absolutely no reason that you shouldn't be out targeting the top 3, not just the top 5. In terms of whether they qualify for the Champions League, we set out in the live event, didn't they? I think they do. I think the confidence that they've had from the Carabao Cup and the way they've reacted to the Carabao Cup, Eddie Howe said he was worried that they were going to maybe have their focuses elsewhere or get distracted. They didn't. They haven't. They've came back really well. The fixtures, as we've just spoke about, I think they do it.
And I do as well. We've got Williams and Murphy definitely deserved man of the match, but it could have easily been Tino. Nova says talked about Tino being a way better left back than right back. He's been so good, much more attacking on the left, crossing, dribbling, things we see him not to see from often enough on the right.
Well, he has a question.
Oh no.
He has a hypothetical for you. If Lewis Hall was to come back this weekend, would Tino start at left back?
Yeah, because you don't change your winning side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But thankfully, that's not a dilemma that we have to worry about, is it? Because of the poor lads out until next season. We've got Trill saying Wilson is so injury prone. So the NHS rub their hands every time he gets. No, that's just no. I mean, okay, I get your point you're making there, Trills, but we'll not finish that.
Just regret reading that comment.
Well, I mean, don't worry, it's nothing rude. Just saying that the NHS will welcome Callum Wilson every time he steps onto the pitch. I think that's a little bit harsh. We've got Nova saying Hall didn't get the minutes last year. Eddie's showing he can take it yet and mould a player into one of his trustables. Don't judge him till next season. I'm assuming they're talking about Will Asula there. Trill says we need to let Wilson go and stop the sentimentality. Darren says just goes to show this is a season in history, like the pundits are saying once again, and clubs are going straight back down. Is PSR damaging the league, do you
think? The gap is certainly getting so much bigger, isn't it? And I think what we've seen is, Brentford and Bournemouth managing to stay up those couple of years ago before PSR really took hold has helped them no end. Bournemouth are storming up the table. Brentford have been thereabouts. But I think as PSR really starts to take hold now that we're in the 3rd or the 4th or the 5th year, it's become so hard for these teams coming up without the backing of the Premier League. So, yeah, very, very interesting to see what happens next season. It looks like, at the minute, Burnley, Leeds and Sheffield United potentially on paper coming up.
Maybe our friends from down the road.
You're not giving any of those a hope of staying up, are you? Really?
No. We'll wait and see who comes up with probably Burnley and I don't know. Leeds United have fallen off. They've got a big game against Borough tonight.
Sunderland's still there.
We've got what else have we got? We've got some comments on Twitter as well, which I'm going to dive into because I did ask people just to describe their feelings on last night in a sentence or so. So I said, sum up in a sentence your thoughts on the performance last night. Martin says, good 3 points, but the squad is creaking a little. Ryan says, thoroughly professional job, 3-0 away from home, can't be grumbled at. Tommy says, they were as good as they had to be to win comfortably. Wouldn't look too much into performance beyond that. John says, done what we needed to do. David says, Eddie Howe's second gear winning Magpies. The GOAT Says clean, professional job, no injuries, hopefully no Tonali knock, no bookings. Good to see the players and coaching team more or less straight-faced and focused at full time. David says enough, and Carl says job done. But it goes back to the point you made about this squad. 2 goalkeepers on the bench last night.
Yeah.
No Joe Willock for Sunday coming up because of the concussion protocols. No Anthony Gordon, it looks like. Callum Wilson, like, you don't really want to bet anything on making it through a game. Isak maybe with a niggling injury here or there. The squad is stretched. And it's something I said to John Gibson actually last week. If they make the Champions League, it would be an absolute miracle, wouldn't it?
The fact that they've won a cup, and we're talking about them potentially, finishing third if they can catch Forest, with no first team signings in the last 3 windows, is nothing short of an absolute miracle. But anyhow, I might be changing my opinion on him getting a statue if they manage that. But no, in all seriousness, the job he's doing is ridiculous. But every time a Newcastle player goes down now, you are holding your breath. They are missing key players. They don't really have the backup, and I think we've touched on it, haven't we? Willisula, Callum Wilson, these type Sean Longstaff coming off the bench. Are they really going to impact games in the way we want? I'm not too sure they are at the minute. So yeah, it's just a remarkable achievement that Newcastle are still there or thereabouts.
It'd be something special if they do get Champions League with the injuries they've suffered, and as we say, the squad depth in comparison to the likes of Chelsea, Man City, and indeed Aston Villa as well. We've got a lot of people talking about the Barnes-Gordon debate that we've been having here. Trio says, I think Gordon comes straight back in. To be honest, we've got another person saying that actually Barnes is better on the ball than Gordon is without it, which is quite an interesting point. Choppy says it's good that we've got these wingers playing well. We've got Nova saying, I've got to disagree with you, Aaron. Gordon hasn't hit the levels of last season, not anywhere near. Barnes is finally looking like he fits in the team. Got to give him his run.
Yeah, fair play. As I say, I didn't think I would be popular with my Barnes shout, so I do get both sides of it.
And we've got some good news of our own, because the shortlist came out the day for the Publisher Podcast Awards for 2025, and the podcast has been nominated once again for the best sport podcast. That's absolutely wonderful.
Yep.
And we're up against the Villa boys again. So hopefully this time around we can win the trophy that they took off us last year. But I would sacrifice the trophy, the best sport podcast. No, I would sacrifice it for the Champions League. We made a deal with the Echo lot that they can take the win at the Regional Press Award as long as we got the League Cup. So I'll offer up the deal to the Villa lads. You take the podcast award and we'll take Champions League football for our club, right?
I don't think they would accept that.
No, I don't either. But there we go. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in and listened, because we couldn't do it without you, and we wouldn't pick up these nominations without you guys as well. So thank you very, very much for that. No Joe Willock, as we mentioned there on Saturday. No Anthony Gordon. They're going to need to get the job done. Sunday. They're going to need to get the job done against Manchester United from the off, aren't they? Because they haven't got these players on the bench to change the game.
They haven't got the game changers, have they? No, they haven't. So yeah, it needs to be sort of the type of performance that we saw, not just last night, but actually at Old Trafford in the reverse fixture when Newcastle were 2-0 up pretty early on before Manchester United could even really gather their thoughts or work out what their tactics were. So hopefully we see a repeat of what we saw back in November, December, whenever Newcastle played them away. So, but look, I was a little bit nervous yesterday, as I say, just because it was a potential banana skin. But I don't think there'll be a shred of nerves in me this weekend. Manchester United at home, Newcastle should, on paper, get that job done.
Yeah, 4:30 kickoff, so people will have been out enjoying the sunshine, hopefully, and come into a proper good atmosphere at St James Park, and getting one over Manchester United is always fun. We've got some questions that have been sent in by our viewers and listeners via the email address, which is theeibwpodcast@reachplc.com. First one is from Owen, who says, loving the podcast, guys. Thanks for all the content. Great win last night. Leicester City are pretty much down and out. And while there's no one I'd take from their squad, I look at Southampton, who are already down, and I can see a couple of players who I think United could look at. Does anyone stand out for you?
From Southampton? Yeah, look, I mean, the obvious one is Tyler Diblin. I mean, I won't be going anywhere near 100 million, which has been reported from, but he looks like a very, very clever talent, and also one that Newcastle United really tried to sign a couple of years ago before he ended up having a really short and brief spell at Chelsea before returning to Southampton. So he would be good for the right price, naturally.
Well, a centre-back, one who's played for England.
No, Howard Bellis, yeah, yeah, tidy player. Outside of that, though, I wouldn't say there's any that really stand out. Ipswich, who we think are going to go down with them. The obvious one is Rory, Liam Delap.
Yeah, sign his dad up.
As for Leicester, well, I'll tell you what, Jeremy Monga, the 15-year-old, if he's looking for
Who's the Leicester winger who got injured? He looked very exciting.
Didi?
No, there's one who's out for the season.
Yeah,
He looks so exciting.
Mean, but I can't
What
remember.
about Kyle Walker-Peters? Would he do a job?
Maybe a couple of years ago. I mean, he's versatile.
He's only 27.
But he's sort of fallen off a little bit, hasn't he?
I think there's options there, probably from Southampton more than anywhere.
Let's have a look at the Leicester team. I mean, Connor Cody is a backup.
No, behave. Yes, like you're reaching. Behave. There's no one there.
Samari in the middle isn't too bad of a player. Newcastle signed him back in the day.
Get that private jet ready. No, I think that's it. Fataru, who is the right winger, who looked very exciting, only 21 years of age, signed from Sporting Lisbon, but he is currently suffering from a nasty injury.
What about Vardy as a backup to Wilson?
Imagine that. But yeah, let us know in the comments anyone that you would fancy taking from any of the relegated sides or those who are likely to go down. Paul says, with Fabian Schär signing his new deal, do we think he will be first choice next season?
No.
So big spend on a centre back then?
Yeah, I don't think it really necessarily has to be big. I think you can probably, in today's market, especially if you go abroad, can probably get a starting centre back to maybe play alongside Botman or maybe even Dan Burn for 30 million. And I think that's probably what Newcastle will do in the summer.
Will they go back in for Mark Gay?
Still hasn't signed that contract, has he, at Palace? So
I think he leaves this summer. But
yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk, hasn't there, about Liverpool? I think that probably depends on whether Virgil van Dijk signs a new contract or not. Look, I think Newcastle will potentially maybe move away from Mark Gay and try and find a cheaper alternative abroad. We saw them maybe trying to do that in January before PSR sort of stunted them from doing it. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe looked elsewhere.
Helen has wrote in and asks, Kieran Trippier made his 600th senior appearance last night, and he said on Instagram that he's not done yet. Given his performances of late, surely Newcastle United keep him for next season, especially if they get into the Champions League.
Helen's talking my language. She's clearly.
Have you written that in?
I am.
Are you Helen?
I'll hold my hands up. I mean, not the same as Callum Wilson, but similar to what I said about Callum Wilson, I think Kieran Trippier as a backup is more than good.
Again, it probably all comes down to the player as well. If Callum Wilson is happy to accept he's going to be third choice,
100%.
If Kieran Trippier is happy to accept that he potentially could be first choice, it comes down to these players not knocking on the door and wanting to go elsewhere. John has a question about Newcastle's possession stats. He says Newcastle had just 42% possession against Leicester City. What do you think this tells us about United's approach going into games? And do you think we will ever see them becoming a team that regularly has the bigger percent of possession?
Do we often see Newcastle with less of the ball?
I think having 42% possession against Leicester City is not something you would automatically think is going to happen.
Yeah, and it was a weird game last night because even at half time when Leicester were 3-0 down, they'd still had more possession. I think it was 53-47 at the halfway mark. Look, I think we've seen Newcastle at times play those games where they purposely don't have a lot of the ball and they like to strike them on the counter. We don't see it too often. But I certainly don't think we have seen recently what we used to see maybe the season where they finished in the Champions League, where they were relentless and sort of try to dominate games and suffocate teams. So maybe that's a sign of Eddie Howe evolving and showing that you can do it both ways. But I don't think, I look at this Newcastle team and think, wow, they never dominate games or have the ball. So, but it was interesting to see those stats last night against Leicester.
I still don't think they're overly comfortable at it. I don't think it's what they're good at, but in time they will be. But he probably needs better players to become that dominating side. But at the end of the day, if you have to win a game with 42% possession, you go and win the game. That's exactly what they did. And we've got another John as well who emailed in to say, I'm a big fan of the podcast. My wife keeps telling me to stop listening, as I always listen around the house. She isn't a football fan, but that will not stop me. So thank you for that lovely comment, John. Always very nice to see. Just before Aaron does the trivia, because you've got it ready, I just want to showcase one of our prints because a lot of people are asking about it. So let me just get it off the shelf. 2 seconds while Aaron deals with the trivia. I'll try not to destroy the. There we go. Right. So as we can see here, for those listening, is that I will look at Kevin Keegan print. A lot of people have been asking where we got it from. So I'll put the link in the podcast description box, because there's another couple that this gentleman has done. One of Alan Shearer and one of the cup final winning team as well. So it's all movie kind of posters and prints. I absolutely love this, by the way. And it's from footballista.co.uk. So that's futbolista.co.uk. So we hit that link that's in the podcast description box, and also we type that address into your URL. You will get to the website. And yeah, there's 3 options from a Newcastle United point of view, but that's where it's from. If you like it, you can head on over there. So Aaron, tell the listeners and viewers what the trivia is while I put this back on the shelf.
The trivia, it feels like it's been a while, doesn't it, since we've done the trivia, but we're back with the usual of players that have played for Leicester and Newcastle in the Premier League. And I think this week we have 13 to go at. Some of them you will not get. A lot of them, pretty reasonable to get. 13 in total.
13 in total. Okay, right. Do you know what? I'm already. I was going to say David Kelly, but I think I'm getting confused because he just scored against Leicester. Oh, right. Do you know what? I'm already at a mind blank.
Goal scorer last night.
Ghost Harvey Barnes. That was ridiculous. Don't have me on your pub quiz team.
Right. So Harvey Barnes is currently, according to this list, is the only player who's.
Iosi Perez, of course, man.
2.
We're gonna Darren Huckabee. No, he went to Coventry. That was in the blue team. Les Ferdinand.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to give us some clues, yeah.
Right. So we are going to go with someone who I did not know played for Leicester, and I totally forgot if he had. A South American winger, Newcastle United royalty.
South American winger, Newcastle.
Who also played 11 games for Leicester in 2009, apparently.
What?
Peruvian.
Solano played for Leicester City.
So, according to this website, he played 11 games, 657 minutes in the 2009 season. Okay, and a right back who won the league at Leicester.
Oh, Danny Simpson. Right, with that. Chris Wood?
Yeah, Chris Wood is there. Oh, have I maybe missed him off? Yeah, Chris Wood is there. Then we've got a young striker who played in the Bobby Robson era. Also played for Wolves.
Paul Robinson?
No.
Young striker.
CC.
Carl Court.
Yep.
Did Tamir Ketsbaya play for Leicester?
No, not according to this. Then we've got a Greek centre-back.
Nikos Stavazas.
Yeah.
That's quite nice, actually.
Defender who played for Newcastle for 7 years in the 90s. Had 1 season at Leicester in 2003.
Oh, I was going to say Steve Watson.
No, but you've got the first name right.
Steve Howie.
Yeah, that's the one. A striker who played 4 games for Newcastle in 2017. He made his name at Leicester from 16 to 20. Was a really good player at Leicester. Algerian, I believe.
Oh, Slimani.
Yep, that's the one.
He should have been something special. His goal scoring record before he joined Leicester was really good.
49 games for Leicester in those 5 seasons, 20 goal involvements. This is a clue that I'm just going to throw out there, but you're not going to get it from this clue. This winger once poured champagne over my auntie's feet in a nightclub.
I mean, bearing in mind the event that you're talking about, I'm going to say.
What do you mean? I'm talking about?
Well,
because
as a party,
yeah, okay. I thought you were there.
Keith Gillespie.
Yeah, that's exactly right. A left back who played for Sunderland and Newcastle and Chelsea and Palace.
Patrick Van Aanholt.
Yeah, he played 1 game. Sorry, he played 12 games for Leicester in
2010.
And the last one, I can't even give you a clue for him because he played 10 games for Newcastle in 92. Franz Carr.
Nice bloke, actually. Gets back to the club quite often. Lovely bloke. Well, there you go, ladies and gents. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's been a pleasure, as always. Sponsored, as always, by NordVPN. I'm just going to put Aaron on the spot. Newcastle United versus Manchester United. Score prediction?
3-1 in Newcastle.
There we go, ladies and gents. We'll hold him to it while he's enjoying himself, wherever he's going next week. And hopefully he's enjoying it on the back of a Newcastle United win. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. And for myself and Aaron, we'll see you guys very soon.